I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking. Holo Janeway is the best Janeway. Hello interwebs, I hope you're doing well, and welcome to my review of the final episode of this first half of this batch of episodes of Star Trek Prodigy's first season. This time, episode 10, A Moral Star Part, as per usual, starting... Okay, so quite literally, as I was filming everyone, I got this package. Like, look, I got a new Star Trek blanket. It's really nice. It literally just came as I was filming right now. You know what? I'm gonna get all nice and cozy for this review. It's a nice thing. It's a just nice, like, comfy little blanket for this review. Staying spoiler-free on this review. I'm gonna let this sit down here. Anyways, now that I'm all discombobulated for this first part of the review, staying spoiler-free up front, what I really loved most about this episode was that it kind of dissuaded my biggest worry going into this, which was, considering that this was technically just the mid-season finale, and we are gonna get a whole half of season 1 later on this summer, and also considering how this show has been broken up into like 5 episodes here, 5 episodes there, and it's kind of been just doled out in little weird chunks, which I think kind of does a disservice to the momentum of the story. I was worried that this one would feel, again, like a kind of momentum killer, that I would get to the end of this episode and be like, yeah, I'm ready for more, and I would just be kind of anxiously waiting until the summer. But what this episode does is it really truly feels like a season finale in the best possible way. I really come out of this episode feeling a sense of conclusion to this sort of arc that we've been on for the entire 10 episodes of this show so far. And yet it's left me with tantalizing hints and excitement for the next part of this series, into the next chapter. So again, while this is technically a mid-season finale, it really is almost better to categorize it as a season finale if you sort of conceptualize that in your head, and it works really well on that front. But that's by no means like a knock against the episode in the sense that I'm like, oh well, it doesn't leave me like wanting more, because it most certainly does, but at least allows me to feel a sense of conclusion here that I was worried that I was not going to get and was just going to have to like sit and stew upon for another few months before we got the latter half, and I really appreciated that. Not only that, here again, this is another episode like last episode where every single character gets a real moment to shine, but as per usual, the standout characters have been Dal, Gwyn, and Rok-Tahk, with Gwyn getting the most to do, Rok-Tahk getting the second best part of the episode, and Dal as well, but also everyone else like Murph and Jenkinpog and Zero also getting true epic moments here too. So I'm really glad that this show is really getting this balance of all these different characters, and I hope it starts to front and center some of the characters that have been a little bit short shrifted this season, like Zero and Rok-Tahk, but I do really think that the show has found an excellent balance of, even in a 20-minute format, giving every character a little bit of something to do and progressing their arcs each and every time, and that was so cool to see. And finally in this episode too, we got some great moments with the Diviner and Deadlock, really kind of giving us answers to stuff that we've been asking this entire season. What I was, again, worried about was that this episode was going to kind of like leave still more vague little tantalizing hints into this lore that we've been getting doled out this past season. But here we do get a really big exposition dump that not only, again, concludes this part of this lore that's sort of been seeping throughout the series, but also still has instigation into what's going to come next for the next part of the show that has me very excited and curious to see where they're going to go with it, and also sort of morally mixes up some of our characters, especially Gwen. So I think this episode just did a fantastic job balancing all these things. And then there's also some really fun action beats as well, some cute little moments for that Cajun Kitty character who finally gets to talk in this episode, and again, some real sense of conclusion to not only the characters and the main overall story arc, but some of the smaller elements here and there, like the workers that were working for the Diviner. So on the whole, this was a fantastic finale, mid-season finale to this show. It has me very excited to see this show going into the next part of its season, hopefully later on this year, but at least leaves me feeling like, okay, if this is where we're leaving it right now, I'm very excited about that, and it also makes me able to recommend this show to some of my friends who I was just saying, like, hold off, wait until there's a big bunch of episodes that you can kind of binge through. Now I'm actually going to go and say to some of my friends that I have been been, holding off talking about this show with and say, now you should watch the show. Most definitely binge these 10 episodes. You're going to get a whole story. You'll fall in love with these characters and really love it. And I just have to sort of say, with this half of the season done, I love the show. It's really, really good. I've had quibbles, and I think there are still problems here and there I have with the show. But I think these last 4 episodes or so have really shown me that this is a strong series and well-deserving of the Star Trek name and doing something really unique with Star Trek. And I'm absolutely loving it. But with that said, I'm going to keep curling up with my blanket here and go into spoilers. So I'm going to mainly split this episode kind of up into chunks to talk about each individual bit. First off, I really loved Dahl throughout this episode getting to kind of show that leadership spirit where he gets to use his ingenuity and use the comm badge in order to make a universal translator for all of the workers on board the Diviner's sort of like worker miner ship. One of the things we talked about way back in the very first episode was that all these workers were unable to actually communicate with each other, which is how they were able to be separated and unable to work together to push back against the Diviner. So I love the sort of conclusion of that very idea that once they're able to communicate through Dahl, who was one of them, that they were actually able to have that moment of getting back and fighting against Deadlock. Also, I really love Dahl sort of pushing everyone to get out of here, get going, him trying to save everyone. And there's that really sweet moment where there's 2 workers who are I really just wanted to tell you that I love you. And I thought that was deeply sweet. What just a wonderful small little smile moment off to the side there. So Dahl getting some really excellent stuff here too. Zero also fighting some people and losing an arm in the moment. I thought all of that was really great. But I think one of the strongest parts of this segment of the episode with the crew down on the Diviner's former ship was Rock Talk and Jenkinpog, because Jenkinpog goes in and is trying to set up the Protostar and use it to sort of reignite the ship's engines, but I can't really figure out how to do it. And Rock Talk's oh, I got this because I've spent so much time learning. And I love that it sort of starts off with Jenkinpog being hold the door, you got this. But then Rock Talk's I can do more than just hold the door. And she actually displays that. Again, sort of pushing back against this idea of her being confined to just being the big, tough person. But actually is very, very smart after we saw her grow in the time travel episode a few episodes ago. I thought that was really brilliant. And Jenkinpog having enough openness to be okay, I'll hold the door. You get it. And I liked that willingness to not have a sense of ego about it that I think was just really sweet and so Star Trekian in the best way, that they were just open to, shifting positions and that they're not defining people in singular ways. And I thought that moment with Rock Talk, I think just spoke to everything that I love Star Trek for, to not assume people based on looks, to allow people to shift and not have ego about it. It was just so Star Trekian, and I just loved it so much. But I think the best part of this episode for me was everything going on with Gwen, because she finally gets to confront the Diviner. And I loved all the moments within that. She tries to hold him with her sort of a morphing metal thing, but then he sort of turns it back on her. It's this was my thing I gave to you, so come on, you can't use this on me. But then her sort of freezing Janeway when it's revealed that, again, Janeway was always working for them. I kind of figured that Holo Janeway was sort of in on the plan the entire time. But then Gwen sort of pausing Holo Janeway because she's finally going to get answers. And what we eventually learn from the Diviners, they go to the holodeck and he sort of explains everything to her in true exposition format, was kind of what we had all been assuming was going on with this show for quite a while, though not in exactly the way that I expected, which I thought was really interesting. For my part, I thought the Protostar was the thing that had been time traveling. But apparently what had happened was the Diviner was the one from the future and came from his planet, which had, once it encountered Starfleet 50 years after that, had caused a civil war after they had contacted Starfleet and basically destroyed their society. And this is something that kind of fits, right, with what we've seen in Star Trek. Star Trek does have a first contact policy that when they encounter people, they try to stay out of things. And it's interesting to me, and it's a nice, interesting critique that says, once Starfleet sort of met these people, they kind of left them to their own devices and let them have a civil war that destroyed them internally, but it was kind of instigated by Starfleet itself. That's something that reads as a criticism of what Starfleet has done, but also given the things that we've seen in Star Trek episodes past, reads as true. That reads as something that would happen, that Starfleet would be like, oh, you guys deal with your own problems, even though we kind of were part of it. I think that that's an interesting thing, and I would understand why the Diviner has a sort of anger towards Starfleet because of it. And I'm curious to see if we'll get more of that backstory as it goes along. But I also liked that Gwen sort of was smart enough to realize, like, you don't trade one atrocity for another, because the Diviner's plan was to use the Protostar to infect all Starfleet ships and destroy them before they were ever able to meet his planet and cause that civil war. And I like Gwen being like, no, that's not how you solve this problem. But it does create this threat of, once the Protostar ever meets the Federation, it will cause that all those ships to start fighting each other. So there's this big threat to Starfleet in general with the ships meeting up. And I just thought that that was such a great explanation to all of this stuff. A little bit of a shift from what I expected, because I thought the Protostar was the time traveling thing, but it turns out the Diviner was actually the time traveler here. So a nice little kind of subversion of what I expected things to go to sort of dole out. And then also, I like that it sets up this threat going into next season, because Zero shows up pissed off at the Diviner and shows their skin and shows what they look like to the Diviner, which causes him to go mad. But also Gwen sees it, and it causes her, when we sort of see her heal at the end of the episode, to not have a memory of the danger that the Protostar could cause to the Federation and to Starfleet. So I like that there's this sort of, ticking time bomb underneath the table here that we have with this crew and this ship. And I thought that all of that was just very, very exciting. And again, you get a sense of conclusion to this story. We get answers, and yet there's more and ticking time bombs to set up. But then we get the biggest reveal at the end of the episode, which is that we meet Admiral Janeway back with the Federation, who is looking for Chakotay and the Protostar, and ships off to go find the Protostar once they get a signal from it, which again sets up that ticking time bomb that we have with the Protostar ever meeting up with the Federation. So I'm also very excited to see what it's going to be when we see actual Janeway and Holo Janeway meet up, and how that's going to play out with the kid characters sort of having to be like, oh, there's two of you now, it'll be interesting to just sort of see that juxtaposition of the two characters when we get to it next season. So like I said, at the end of the day, this was a lot of fun. I think really excellent moments. I think it was it just really proved to me that this show is finding its own voice a lot faster than pretty much every single other Star Trek show has found its voice. I think Lower Decks, in my mind, is probably the only other Star Trek show that found its voice as fast, if not faster, than Prodigy. But other than that, I think Prodigy is honestly, while I, again, had some rocky bits with it here and there, over these past 3-4 episodes, I've really felt that it's a really, really strong series, and I've deeply come to really enjoy and appreciate it, and I'm just very excited to see where it's going to go. So, loved this episode, thought it was a great mid-season finale / kind of season finale, but I am very excited to next week get back to Star Trek Discovery, so we'll be reviewing that coming next week, the beginning half of the latter half of that season, of season 4. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week with Discovery. Live long and prosper, my friends.